probably rather hear the music than listen to me, but fortunately, you don't have to listen to me for very long, which is a good thing. I'm Dr. Ed Crowther of the Adams State College Department of History, Government Philosophy, and I'm delighted to be here tonight and to welcome you to a very important presentation about the new great game, the great game Reanimated. For those of you that are not necessarily versed in the events and episodes of 19th century history, the Great Game really was a contest between Imperial Russia and Great Britain for hegemony in the areas around the Caspian Sea, with the prize being the control to access to India. In recent years, with the emergence of radical Islam, the Great Game has been reanimated as external forces confront internal forces within the regions of Afghanistan, Pakistan, and India. And much like the 19th century contest, the 21st century contest is characterized by a great deal of misunderstanding of the external powers about the culture and reality and perception of the cultural groups within Afghanistan and within Pakistan. Pakistan, which had been a great ally in the so-called War on Terror, and now becoming very alienated at the policies of the United States government. And that alliance, of course, threatened with disruption. We are very fortunate tonight to have something other than Fox News to inform us about the world of Southern Asia. It's my distinct pleasure to introduce a participant, an interested observer in the events that have affected the history of Pakistan in the last 30 years, Brigadier General Rashid Ali Malik. General Malik, as you can read in your brochure, is a 30-plus year veteran of the Pakistani military. He's had a broad range of experiences as a Pakistani and important experiences as a security expert in the complex world of international relations and security in the 21st century. And so with that, it's my honor to introduce and to present General Rashid Ali Malik. General. Adam's statement.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I can't see many of you because the light is right on my face. I don't know. But let me start by thanking all of you for taking time out to come and listen to me. Now, I've done these presentations lots of places. If you were talking to an audience in London or somewhere in Europe, people understand the Great Game. People understand because a lot of their grandfathers and forefathers had been in India, and they knew how the whole thing has transpired and how the things that are now unfolding in that part of the world, they were aware. I've spoken to audiences here in the US. They are not so much aware of what was happening 200 years ago or 300 years ago, and how those so many years that have passed have affected the current things that are happening there. 200-300 years ago, the United States was not a superpower. The United States was not, if I can use the word, meddling all over the world. United States was just trying to build its roads and infrastructure and trying to do something what China is now doing. So But now, of course, the United States is very much involved all over the world. So my presentation basically talks about what has happened, and I'll trace back the history of the last 30 years, why we, when I say we, it means us and yourselves, got involved with the muck that there is. Don't forget that Pakistan, when I say we, Pakistan has been independent for about 65, 66 years. And all these years, we've been great friends of the United States, all these years. There's no question about it. We've had our ups and downs, but we have been a sole supporter of the United States in that region. The other part of the main part of the Indian subcontinent, India, was not so much in favor with the United States because that was an ally of, at that time, the Soviet Union. But ever since the demise of the Soviet Union, the Indians have cozied up to the United States, and for good reasons, because they're a larger country, they're a larger economy. They've gotten themselves close to the Americans, and somehow this has not gone very well with Pakistan, because Pakistan feels threatened. It feels threatened from India, but in my heart I know that there is not much in this threat, because there is a deterrence with both these countries, and that deterrence is there to stay, and therefore not much. But you can't take away the fact that the United States at one time, the main adversary was Russia, Warsaw Pact and NATO countries. I mean, they were outmaneuvering each other, be they placing ICBMs, or be they placing troops in Germany or in Poland or wherever. So every country has an adversary, and then based on that adversary, the country forms its strategy. And so did the countries in the Indian subcontinent, so did India and Pakistan. Well, that's the background. And with so much the background, I'd like to get on with the presentation tonight. And the presentation tonight is, as the professor spoke about, and let me be honest, I've had myself introduced many times, but this is the first time somebody has introduced me where he understood the subject, and when he spoke, he understood. I was very happy that an American understood the subject in so much detail. I was introduced, and people just talked about myself, not too much about the subject. But the great game, and I call it Reanimated. Then, of course, presently the war on terror, and what's happening to the world after Osama bin Laden. These are the areas which I will talk about, and then there are implications for the world. This talk is basically in two parts. The first part is that I speak, and if there is an important question and you want to ask the question immediately, you're more than welcome. Just stand up and ask the question. Or otherwise, in the second part, we'll have a session where I'll take on all your questions. Okay. Now, this is a gentleman, like as I was saying, that if I showed this slide in the UK, they would know. He was the Governor General appointed by the government of, by the US, by the British in India. And this is what he had to say 100 years ago, exactly 100 years ago today. I mean, he said this in 1911. and he said this about Afghanistan and Central Asia. Very prophetic and very true. My presentation is going to be in the following parts. The first part, a bit about the great game. The second part is the first 10 years of the last 30 years, and in which I call this the decade of the demise, and this is the demise of the Soviet Union. And you see from one leader to the second. The leader, you see Mr. Brezhnev, and 10 years later, this is the leader who had a mind and who said, no, we don't have to be in Afghanistan. We don't have to force people to do what they should do. And he ended up breaking his own country, but I think he brought a lot of sense in the world. This was the end of the communism. He was the president of the Soviet Union at the end of the 10 years. The second one is the second decade. This is the decade where there was a big void. And this can happen again. As the pressure builds up within the US, the public says, the new leaders debating, the Republican Party leaders debating, this is an issue for the elections, that they want the American troops back home. And therefore, there is a danger of a void once again being created. And again, the sort of mess that you find in that area. And that's why we say that the great game continues. This is a book written by Rudyard Kipling, and he ends by saying that this great game will continue until the last man falls. So, I mean, how prophetic. But anyway, this is the great game, and the two gentlemen you see in the middle of the blue is the map of Afghanistan, and the first guy with a beard is Mullah Umar. He's the guy with one eye, and he's the one who heads the Taliban. The second one is Osama bin Laden, who's taken out 2 months ago, maybe 3 months ago. So Mullah Umar was in Afghanistan, and then Osama bin Laden came. So that's the second decade. And that decade is the decade of the void in Afghanistan. And because of the void, so many problems arose. The third decade, unfortunately, is the decade where the two largest religions of the world have now separated. They were not like as they are now. There is a very big divide between the two religions. It's for various reasons, but there is today, sadly, a divide between the two religions, the major two religions of the world. And I call this the decade of the divide. This is the divide between the religions. The next part is about what is melting in that pot of the Central Asia. And of course, we'll talk about some of the issues, some of the realities, and some of the myths of what has happened in the last 30 years and why we are where we are. And finally, these are some of the conclusions that I've drawn. The way things are, this is what I think is going to happen. So these are the parts of the presentation, and we'll get over with them one by one. The first one is, this is just to recap. I'm sure you all know this, but this is just to recap. This is a map of the area of interest, of the area we're talking about. This does not include some of the countries which are not in Central Asia, but are of current interest. For example, Libya. Today we've had Gaddafi killed, but he's a little away. He was in Africa. But Africa, he was with Egypt, where Hosni Mubarak was removed, and there's a lot of chaos in Egypt. But we are talking basically of this part of the world, and that's the Central Asia. And just for your information, Russia is on the top, I'm sure you know this, but I thought I'll just go over this. Then there are the 5 states who broke away from the Soviet Union, and these are very important states, and they are, in the next 10 years, they will figure very prominently in the world. These are very rich states. These are states which have a lot of natural resources. These are states where the Soviets thought that they were their reserves of oil, of gas, electricity. These are very rich states. Suddenly they broke away from the Soviet Union. And the point to remember here is that all these states are 90% Muslim states. And the other thing to remember is that these states are all Sunni states. For those of you, I'm sure you know, but just for those 1 or 2 people who don't know, that the Sunnis and Shiites, these are the 2 main parts or sects of Islam, just like Catholics and Protestants are parts of Christianity. So the Sunnis look up to Saudi Arabia, and the Shiites look up to the leadership, the religious leadership in Iran. They are the Shiites. So the Shiites are the minority of the Muslims, and Sunnis are the majority of the Muslims. And a point to remember always, and I've seen a lot of people go wrong here, is when they forget that Osama bin Laden or Al-Qaeda was only a Sunni movement, a Sunni extremist movement. There were no Shiites part of Al-Qaeda. And sometimes I used to hear experts come on television, on Fox News and other news, say Al-Qaeda in Iran. There is no Al-Qaeda in Iran. There cannot be Al-Qaeda in Iran. Never could be, because Iran is Shiite. Osama bin Laden will not have one person, one Shia as his follower. So somehow that part is forgotten. But these states, these 5 states, rich in natural resources, very poorly governed by very corrupt rulers, extremely corrupt rulers, and very poor form of democracy, but very rich, all Muslims. And of course, I'm talking of Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Kyrgyzstan, Turkmenistan, and Tajikistan. As you come further south of the 2 states, Turkmenistan and Tajikistan and Uzbekistan, you cross a river. It's a very famous river, historically very famous river. It's called the Oxus River. And as soon as you cross, this river is in the south of where Tajikistan in the red and yellow, where Uzbekistan is written. The river runs along on the southern extremities. And as soon as you cross that river, you're into Afghanistan. And so this is an important river. I mean, it has figured in history again and again, called the Oxus River. Then there is, of course, Kabul. And then south of Kabul is Pakistan. And then south of Pakistan is India. Unfortunately, many times, many solutions are given with India left out. India cannot be left out of this, because India is very much the next place where it's going to happen. In Pakistan, if Pakistan, God forbid, falls to the extremists, and we are fighting a great battle, which perhaps for some reason, and I say that I feel very sorry when I see some of the leadership here in the US, they don't see what's Pakistan going through. We're fighting a very, very serious battle against the extremists. We are not on the side of the extremists, we are fighting against the extremists. And it is a 50-50 battle today. And God forbid, if the extremists win in Pakistan, this movement is headed nowhere but into India. So you can't leave India out. India has been the route, traditional route. All these people who raided into India from the north, be it Alexander or Genghis Khan or the Ghoris or the Ghaznavis or the Mughals, they all came this route. Even Alexander the Great, he came down this route through Afghanistan, through what is now Pakistan, through India. So it is that old route which once again is threatened to be reanimated. So I just wanted to explain to you that this is the situation on the ground. Okay, so this is just a very brief of the great game, like the professor had spoken about. So there is not much that I need to is just, I'll flash some of the points here, but each point is explanatory. Basically, the imperial, they were both the Russians at that time, the USSR, and the Indians, not the Indians really, but the British in India. And they were afraid of each other. And therefore, this great game was fought. The Russians advanced south, and they went up to Amudria, which is the Oxus River. And the 3 Afghan wars. But Russia has always had influence over, they always had influence over Afghanistan, because all the states, I talked about those 5 states, these 5 states they bordered with Afghanistan. So therefore, the Russians had influence in Afghanistan. The first decade of the last 30 years, the idea was to get to the warm waters of the Indian Ocean, and the Russians invaded Afghanistan with 150,000 troops. And that time, of course, as I said, Mr. Brezhnev was the president. The run-through was complete. The Russians they came south. There was a war, there was a long war, but the Russians were very strong, and the Russians came all the way south. That is the time when the United States got into the area, and as you will see perhaps in the next slide, that United States takes a lot of credit and says that we forced the Russian, not forced, but we outsmarted the Russians. We sort of moved them into Afghanistan because we knew that they would be destroyed here. And how would the Americans destroy the Russians in Afghanistan? They brought jihadis, Muslim fighters from all over the world. And they were all Sunni fighters. This, I say it again and again, these are all Sunni fighters. Because there were Shia fighters, not so many, they were from Iran, but majority of these mujahideen were Shiite fighters, and they all came into Afghanistan to fight against the Soviets. These mujahideen were funded by the CIA, and it was said at one time that the greatest number of CIA people besides Washington were found in a Pakistani town called Peshawar, which is on the border with Afghanistan. They were there with bags of money, and they were giving out this money to these freedom fighters or the jihadis. At that time, they were known as mujahideen, to fight the Soviets. But they were losing, the mujahideen kept losing, until a maverick senator here in the US, and a lot of the US people have spoken to think of him as some kind of a maverick. They don't take him seriously. He just died 5 or 6 months ago. A senator from Texas called Charlie Wilson. He, for I don't know for what reason, he became the main manipulator here. And he said, if you want to fight the Russians, you will have to give enough and suitable arms to the Mujahideen, because the Mujahideen were being beaten by the Russians. And the main instrument of this beating was the Russian helicopter called Mi-24, which was a bulletproof helicopter. It used to come down in front and keep firing, destroy whole villages, and it could not be shot down. And Charlie Wilson, in his wisdom, there will always be a question in my mind as to what was his interest, because he was known to be historically a person of loose, if I can say, when he's dead, we should have respect for the gentleman, but he was not a great human being. Why would he want to do this? What was his motive? I would like to be educated if anyone of you has anything to say. But he forced the United States government to give Stinger missiles to the Mujahideen. And that's what turned the war. And I remember very clearly, I was a lieutenant colonel in the army at that time, and when the news of the first helicopter being shot down by a Stinger missile, and then 2 days later, there were 2 more helicopters shot down. And that really spelled the withdrawal or the retreat or the turn back of the Russians. The Russians had come all the way to the south on the Pakistan border. But from there, they were pushed back. And of course, there was a new man in Russia, Mr. Kosygin. He has taken over, and he said, we have no business to be in Russia, and let's pull out. So, but a lot of this credit goes to Charlie Wilson. Fighters, we're talking about them, Pakistan, Conduit, Stingers, sorry. 5 Central Asian republics formed. But the sad part is something like what is about to happen now. The Americans left and they created a very big void. 7 million refugees from Afghanistan came into Pakistan. When they were pushed from the north, they had to go south because that's the only direction they can go. This is happening again. The American army has pushed all these people south. They have to run south. That's the only place to go because they're being pushed from the north. And in the south is Pakistan. So we had 7 million refugees, out of which about half of them returned and half of them haven't returned. They still are in that tribal area. Some of them enterprising, they have moved to bigger cities and they are now big businessmen. They run narcotics trade, they run weapons, they have a lot of weapons, and they are trained, they are fighters, and they moved into big cities. Some of them now own a lot of transport. They move these big trucks and lorries, so they're doing good business. And some of them have made false national ID cards and they become Pakistani citizens. And reportedly, some of them have become members of the parliament. So, so that's what has happened to these Afghans who came to Pakistan. Some Afghans who went to Iran, Iran was very tough. Iran was not hospitable. And they just said, get out or we'll kill you. So they all returned from Iran. They came back from Iran. We were hospitable and we are paying the price. This is a picture of a very smart man. I have a great deal of respect for him. He is one of your smart secretaries of state. And of course, I'm sure all of you know him. And this is what Mr. Brzezinski had to say He was the Secretary of State, but he said this well after what they had done to the Soviets. And this is what he had to say. I hope, or I wish to God, I don't know whether you can read this or not. Can you read it? You can read it? All right, thank you. This is what he says. And he's written one of the finest books on that region. It's called The Chessboard. And it's a great book. It's available in the market. And he really had, I wish he could be an advisor here to the present lot in the government here. But he understood the situation. Anyway, so he says we induced the Russians into Afghanistan so that we could take revenge of Vietnam. Okay. The next decade, and this is where now the Americans have left. There's a big void in Afghanistan. And this is, I call this is the advent of extremism, really. This is where extremism, there was a vacuum. 1/3 of the male population of Afghanistan had been killed. 1/3 of the male population. A lot of people killed. There were 50,000 trained veteran Afghan fighters, non-Afghan fighters. These people who were fighting the Soviets, they were now there and ready and willing to go. But they had nowhere to go because their masters, the CIA, had just pulled back because they had done their job and they left. And suddenly they were there. There were a lot of civil wars in Afghanistan. And then, in the middle of all this, in May of 1996, Osama bin Laden moved here into Afghanistan, in southern Afghanistan. And he set up his headquarters here, very quietly. He was fighting for the Americans. The Americans knew who he was. They knew everything about him. But they had just left. So he said, this is a good place to set up my headquarters. So he set up his headquarters here. And within 1 or 2 months, Mullah Umar emerged as the leader in Afghanistan because there was the huge gap. There was nobody there. And Mullah Umar, he set up a Taliban headquarters. And Mullah Umar was from Afghanistan. He is a Pashtun. He was a product of the madrasas. And he had no problem setting up a government in Afghanistan. And then gradually, he started to clear areas in the north. He moved up in the north. And Osama bin Laden did nothing here. He just focused on what he was going to do later on. So he was doing his own work quietly, whereas Mullah Umar was trying to recapture all of Afghanistan. Osama bin Laden quietly buys safety. Of course, the safety he has to buy is from Mullah Umar, because Mullah Umar is the local guy. And Osama bin Laden, he didn't have a lot of people with him. Osama bin Laden moved, he had to start with 70 to 75 people only. Just, that's all he moved with. And of course he had people in different parts all over the world. I mean, he had, but he just had a hard core of people with him to protect him. Taliban retook, gradually they went up north and they started to control entire Afghanistan. And if you recall, there was a very charismatic Afghan leader from the north, and he was called Ahmad Shah Massoud. And he was killed 2 days before 9/11. Just imagine, nobody knew at that time, nobody of course knew about 9/11 also, but how everything was being planned. He was the last piece of resistance in Afghanistan, and he was killed by 2 men disguised as reporters. They went up to him and they blew themselves up, and they killed Ahmad Shah Massoud. And then, of course, 9/11. So that's the end of the second decade. Now what happens? Now, this is, I don't know whether you can see this or not. This is this is a depiction of, it explains it's very clearly as to what has happened in Afghanistan. This is a convoy of troops moving in, and NATO troops. As you can see the sign on the left, they're headed into Afghanistan. And if you start seeing the tombstones, the first tombstone is of the Mongols, the second is of Alexander the Great, the third is of the Mughal Empire, the fourth is of the British Empire, the fifth is of the Soviet Union. The last one I don't think you can read. Can you read this? The last one says, "This space available." Now you don't have to be a genius to think who's going to be put there. I wish it doesn't happen, but Afghanistan has been known to be the graveyard of empires. I mean, empires, huge empires, lost their way in Afghanistan. I was speaking 2 years ago at Boston University, and I started off by asking, are there any history teachers here? Geography teachers, and they were, of course, they were the Boston, they all kinds of, and I said, I don't know why the history and geography teachers don't learn from history and geography, that Afghanistan has never had a foreign ruler. They've always fought the foreign ruler, and they've always thrown him out. And this depiction is from a British magazine. It's not that I've made it, and I just picked it up, but it explains the point very vividly. It makes the point that, anyway, so this, let's go to the third decade, which I say is a split between the two largest faiths. Now, after 9/11, the Americans, they were hurt, they were hit, and 26 days later, they decided to attack Afghanistan. And thank God, they decided to attack the right place. There were people within the government at that time, some of them very senior, some of them included the Vice President of the United States, who advocated that they go to Iraq, hit Iraq. I mean, Iraq had nothing to do with 9/11, but he was insistent. It is on record that Mr. Cheney, he advocated going to Iraq because they had to go somewhere. They've been hit, they've been hurt, and they wanted to take the revenge. But thank God there were people at that time who overruled Mr. Cheney, and after 26 days of deliberations, the Americans decided to go to Afghanistan. Now, the funny thing is, when I say you don't learn from history, is that the Americans used the same locals in Afghanistan which the Russians had used 20 years ago, 20 years before them. The same Tajiks, the same Uzbeks. There are pictures of people sitting on Russian tanks crossing the Oxus River, and 20 years later, these people had grown 20 years older and they were again sitting on American tanks this time. The only difference was that this was an American tank, and 20 years ago it was a Russian tank, but it was the same people who were used to attack Afghanistan. That's why I keep saying, why don't we learn from history? Anyway, 2 months later, the United States had taken Kabul. The Taliban had been routed. So far, at this time, the entire world, with no exception, was with the United States. Because the United States was hit, and if you are hit, you had the right to hit back. So everybody in the world was with you. That was when you write this curve or this graph of United States military action was supported by the world. Then what happened? They pushed the Taliban out. Mullah Umar fled. Osama bin Laden was holed up in a 10 square mile area on the Pakistan-Afghanistan border. This place is called Tora Bora. And Osama bin Laden was in this area. The Americans had 130,000 troops outside of Tora Bora. Osama bin Laden was there to be taken. Then for some strange reason, Mr. Cheney's initial decision was accepted, and 120,000 troops were decided to be moved to Iraq. And less than 10,000 troops, American troops, were left to catch Osama bin Laden in Tora Bora. The rest is all history. Osama bin Laden disappeared till he was caught 10 years later, and you went into Iraq. And of course, as history or later developments proved, that going into Iraq was based on, as it is said, incorrect information. There were no weapons of mass destruction, and this has been accepted. So you really went into Iraq for very little reason. But a good thing was done, which I'll talk about a little later. But Osama bin Laden had disappeared. Mullah Omar disappeared, Osama bin Laden disappeared. And please understand that if the pressure comes from the north to the south, these people can only, I've been asked this question, why were these people in Pakistan? They went into Pakistan because if the pressure is put in the north, they can run to the south. That's the only place to run. And south is where Pakistan is. So they all ran into Pakistan. Iraq became the focus, Afghanistan was neglected. And this is the time when Al-Qaeda began to spread its doctrine worldwide, the doctrine of jihad, the implanting of the thought in the minds of people that we have to fight the jihad against the Christians. This is what happened in the third decade. So, Russia, please don't disregard Russia. Russia very much, they were hurt that their states had broken away, and these were the states that the Russians thought always were their reserves. They always counted these states as their reserves. Imagine United States today counts Alaska and the oil that there is in Alaska as its reserves. Imagine if Alaska, for some reason, breaks away. Suddenly, you are devoid of that great reserve that you have. So this is what happened. The Russians just suddenly thought that their reserves have been taken away. Of course, they have not been taken away by the Americans, but they had broken away from the motherland, from Russia. And So the Russians are very, very, very interested in coming back. This you will see in the coming years to come. As soon as the Americans pull out, the Russians will be back. And this is what I say, the great game goes on. Okay. So having seen the 3 decades, how things have happened in the region, it's now time to take a look at some of the more interesting facets of the composition of this area. The first one on the top is when I say 5 CAR, these are the 5 Central Asian republics. And underneath, I say this is their population, 60 million people. 60 million, out of which easily 56, 57%, or 57 million would be Muslims, Muslim Sunnis. On the right, in the red, is 30 million, and this is 30 million Chinese. Of course, China is not 30 million, but this is the people in the province of Urumqi, the Xinjiang, the Xinjiang province. This is the problem. This is the province where the Chinese say that this is their biggest problem, the Muslim movement in this province. There is a big Muslim movement here. This is the Muslim province. This is the largest province of the Chinese. The size of this province is the size of Texas. So it's a huge province. And 30 million people here, out of which 25 million people are Muslims. And they want independence. And they border with Uzbekistan and Turkmenistan. There's a lot of trouble in that area. If you asked a serious Chinese leader as to what is the #1 problem, he will say Xinjiang province. They don't want Xinjiang province to break away. Xinjiang province wants to break away. If you recall the Olympics that they had 3 years ago, the biggest threat to the Olympics was from the Muslims of this province. So this is a big problem. I'm just counting 30 million people of the Chinese who are very much connected here. And I could be wrong, but you might hear of a term called Chinese Taliban in the next year or so, because that is a movement. The Chinese have done everything they can to quell this movement. They have been very ruthless. They have moved large Chinese population, ethnic Chinese population into that area, somehow to beat the Muslims there, but that's not working. You can't forcibly change the ratio of a people. You can never do this. Historically, this has never been done. Many, many countries of the world have tried this, but you cannot forcibly change the ethnic composition of people. You can't bring people, the people will go away. Then the next one is Pakistan, about 200 million people. Then in the south, 1,000 million people, 1 billion people, Indians. The point I want to draw your attention to here is that there are more Muslims in India than there are in Pakistan. Now, does that come as a surprise to some or no? You're all aware of that? But it comes to, it is a big surprise to a lot of people that there are more Muslims in India than there are in Pakistan. So that has to also kept somewhere in mind. Then there are about 28 to 30 million people in Saudi Arabia, 10 million in Israel. Israel is not out of this cauldron. Israel is very much here. 70 million Iranians. And in the middle is Al-Qaeda and Taliban, and you have Afghan people. This is about 30 million people. This is right at the core. So this is the region of what I'm talking about. Okay. There are some statistics of this region, very interesting statistics. This region that I've spoken about is 1/3 of the world's population. 1/3 of the world's population. This is half of the world's Muslim population. It is 2/3 of the world's Sunni population. It has 2/3 of the world's oil and gas reserves. So, I mean, it's very, very important for those who think of oil and gas as control of this is control of the future. There are many feuds in this area. The Arab-Israeli feud, the Shia-Sunni feud. Remember the feud between Iraq and Iran, Iran and Saudi Arabia. Constantly they're feuding with each other. India and Pakistan, Russia and its former states, those 5 states I spoke about. There are issues here, Iran's nuclear ambitions, China's Muslim concerns I've spoken about, India's regional. India wants to be a player. India says, I am rich, I'm big, I want to be a player in this area. So that creates a lot of problems. Pakistan's worsening internal security situation. Okay. Now I'm coming on to the issues in the region. I've given you a sufficient background, and there are now some issues which I thought are worth mentioning here. The first one is the border between Afghanistan and Pakistan. It's a 2,200 kilometer long border. All mountains. The border is not defined. It is not like the border that you have with Mexico. Here your border is very well defined. It's fenced, it's patrolled, it's 24 hours watched by satellites, and yet people cross over. This border between Pakistan and Afghanistan is neither patrolled, there are no satellites covering it. It doesn't have a boulder or it doesn't have something on the ground that you can say, all right, the border runs along this river. They're all mountains. They're the same people who live on either side of the border. They work in one place, they live, they sleep in Afghanistan. In the morning, they cross over into Pakistan, they do their work, open a shop, whatever, and evening they go back home. These are the same people, they speak the same language, they wear the same clothes, they are married into each other. These are all the people we call Pashtuns. And these are all the people we also call Taliban. And they are the majority in Afghanistan. I'll talk about the composition of people in Afghanistan. But it has to be remembered that these are the people who live on either sides of the border, which is not a defined border. There are 2 major roads which cross from one to the other country. But that is it. Then there are innumerable. There are paths, mountain passes, where people come and go when they want to. Innumerable. That's called the Durand line. Durand was some Englishman who just sat in his tent and who drew a line, and he said this is going to be the boundary between Pakistan and Afghanistan when the British left. And it's been a butt of a lot of jokes that he was drunk when he drew this line or whatever. But the fact is that this border is a very insecure border. It's very difficult to patrol it. It's very difficult to control the border. That's where all the problem is. On this side of the border is Pakistan's tribal areas, where all the fighting is going on. In the north, that's where the Americans are. And therefore this American and Pakistani blaming each other that you're not doing enough and so on and so forth. The drone attacks, these have been, I'll be honest here, these drone attacks have taken out a lot of, as you can say, the bad guys. But what they've actually done is that they kill one bad guy and they kill 10 guys who are just neutrals. Now these 10 neutrals, their families, they've become your sworn enemies. So the price you pay is that you've killed one bad guy and you made 10 families your enemies. So the graph or the number of enemies keeps going up, whereas you killed bad guys, surely. If you wouldn't have been able to kill these guys. So it's a tough thing to balance. But now, the dangerous thing or the thing that might happen is that your adversaries are also beginning to get drones. And now drones are going to hit back. Now this drone war is going to take this whole method of fighting a war or the manner to a new plane, because drones will start hitting each other. And questions are already being asked that this drone technology is no more now with the Americans. It's now with a lot of people, especially the Chinese. Last month they had a big air show where they showed more than 200 kinds of drones, different drones. So the adversaries are also getting armed with drones. And so that's the downside of drones. Logistic support routes. Now, everything that goes into Afghanistan, 80% goes through Pakistan. 80% of everything that goes into Afghanistan. Afghanistan is landlocked. So if you want to send a bottle of water to the American soldiers in Afghanistan, it has to go through Pakistan. And this is a journey which takes 2 nights and 2 days of driving, and it's about over 1,000 miles. And if the drivers change, then it takes 2 nights. If the drivers don't change and the drivers halt and rest, then it takes 3 days. And out of 10 trucks which go into Russia, into Afghanistan, 8 go through Pakistan, carrying various supplies, Hummer vehicles, tanks, stuff, ammunition, so on, and also stuff to eat. And this goes now out of these vehicles, there is an assessment which has been made that 50% are either robbed on the way or they are burnt. So if you have to send 10 bottles of water to Afghanistan, you need to send 20 so that 10 get there. So this is one dilemma that the American logistic planners face all the time. Now, it has been said that they're trying to look for routes from the north. There are no routes from the north. Routes from the north will invariably run through either Russia. Imagine supplies from American troops, for American troops going through Russia, or they will run through Iran. Iran will never let anything go through for American troops. So there is no way, I keep seeing accounts by American politicians and also by, I would say, not very well informed military writers and military thinkers here in the US that we should go for the northern routes. There are no northern routes. That's the unfortunate thing. You are dependent on the route through Pakistan. That's somehow, and that's where the relationship of Pakistan and United States really has to be, it has to be a lean and very clear relationship, because you need the supplies in there and you need to take the supplies through Pakistan. The Russians, surprisingly, have offered the Americans, and the Russians, since beginning of this year, have contracted with the Americans that we will fly in some of your supplies. So the Russians have been given a contract. The Russians have the largest helicopter fleet in the world. And their helicopters are now being used to move some of the stuff for American troops. And the Americans know it. The Russians will stop this or create impediments as soon as Mr. Putin thinks that the Americans need to be starved in Afghanistan. So you are dependent, surprisingly, on the Russians to provide you 20% of the supplies which come from the north. So this is one point I just thought I'd make it here so that you understand how much we are dependent on each other. The cost of war, Pakistan is fighting this war. Really, this is not our war. It wasn't our war. It was an American war because the Americans were hit in 9/11. We weren't hit in 9/11. None of those 19 people who were on board those planes were Pakistani. And just for your information here, there has not been a single Pakistani who has been found to be a part of Al-Qaeda. Not even one person. Pakistanis have never been a part of Al-Qaeda. But Pakistan has fought this war, and it's cost us very heavily. And if the American economy is beginning to feel the effect, not only that's an understatement. I mean, you've been shaken. Imagine what has happened to Pakistan's economy. We've really been shaken. We paid a very heavy price. And we're not talking at this time of the loss of human beings on both sides, American lives and Pakistani lives. The other issue is of the poppy crop. This is one thing which is, the graph has gone on and on and on. The graph goes up and up every year. And last year it was said that poppy crop worth $4 billion was exported to the world. So that's a lot of poppy. This is a point which I think you should understand, that India, because it's beginning to do well, and I wish them all the best. They're a very hard-working nation. They've done very well, but they're doing well. It's given them this little urge to be the regional, players. They want to be a player in Afghanistan. India, ladies and gentlemen, India does not have a contiguous border with Afghanistan at all. Even 1 inch of border, India and Afghanistan don't have, which is contiguous. So why is India so much interested in Afghanistan? We'll talk about that a little while later. But India wants to be a player here. The Kabul raid or the Abbottabad raid on Osama bin Laden, various stories. The story that I have, and it's not, I don't know whether it's official or not. It's not, I don't have official information, but my assessment, and I have a mind and I see what is happening. I live there. I have been where Osama bin Laden was. Of course, not when he was there, but later on I've gone and seen that place. It's not a $1 million chateau or whatever it was called. It was just a house. There are 5, if you Google it today, there are at least 5 more houses in that area which are taller, bigger than this house. And he was not living a life of luxury, as some of the reporters have said. He was just living a rustic life. But I'm not defending him here. He was there, and this is my own assessment. The CIA knew where he was. They knew at least 8 months in advance. The Pakistani intelligence knew where he was 8 months in advance. They were keeping him under observation. The CIA had rented a house close by to keep an eye on Osama bin Laden so that he doesn't get away. And the Pakistani intelligence was keeping an eye on the CIA. So this is a game which is played all the time. Now, I personally think that both these agencies had worked out. It was decided that whenever the Americans want, they will capture or kill Osama bin Laden when they wanted to. The decision for the date and time was with the Americans. Whenever you want to do it. The Pakistanis, on their part, had said, we will support you. We will let nobody interfere, and you come and do what you want to. I personally think that this raid was rehearsed. The raids were rehearsed during day and during night. There is no question at all that Pakistan was sleeping, or Pakistani agencies or Pakistani Air Force was caught sleeping when all this action happened. This place where Osama bin Laden was, if helicopters or anybody flew for another 5 minutes in the direction in which they came, this bearing on which these helicopters came from Afghanistan, if they didn't land at where Osama bin Laden was, and if they flew for another 5 minutes or 6 minutes, it'll be on top of Pakistan's most protected area, the Pakistan's nuclear facility. In 5 more minutes, it is there. Can anyone in his wildest of imagination think that an army or an air force or a military would be so oblivious that there is some helicopter movement, some planes flying in, and they're flying in the direction of the nuclear capability? I mean, forget about Osama for a while. That's why I rule out the general reports which were thrown out. The Pakistani government, and I say I'll support the government of Pakistan, Pakistani government did not want to be a part of this raid because it was thought if the public came to know that Pakistan government was involved in the raiding and killing of Osama bin Laden, Islamabad and a lot of places would have been burned down. The public would have taken up to the streets because Osama bin Laden was very, very close to the public of Pakistan. And therefore, the government has decided that we will raise a hue and cry that you violated our space, you've come here without any information, but this will die down after 2 or 3 months, as it has now. So it was a mutually arranged thing, and the Pakistani government did not want that the Americans or the public to know that they were a part. And I think the Americans also, in their own judgment, I think they did a wise thing to kill him and to dispose him of, because if they did not do that, a lot of the things, as they say, Pandora's box would have opened, and he would have said this, that, the other, and whatever had happened, they did it was a good job from the point of view of the Americans. It was a good job from the point of view of the Pakistani government. But recriminations aside, because that was for public, that was for display. that the Pakistan government said that the Americans did not tell us and they came into our space. And the Americans said that the Pakistanis knew and they didn't share the information. In my estimation, I think this is wrong. It was impossible for both parties not to know where Osama bin Laden was. This is another issue that I want to talk about, which is disregard. Afghanistan comprises of three big ethnic components. The largest component, which is about 60%, are the Pashtuns, who form the Taliban, most of them. They live in the south and east of Afghanistan, and they live on the border with Pakistan. Remember, they are 60% Pashtuns. And in this 60% are the two major towns of Afghanistan, Kabul and Kandahar. Kabul has always been the seat of the government of Afghanistan. And therefore, this area is the area of the Pashtuns. In the south and in the east. Not half, but 1/3 of entire Afghanistan is with 60% of people called the Pashtuns. A majority of them are Talibans. And a majority of them have access or relationship across the border in Pakistan. The remaining 40%, 10% are Shiites and they are Hazaras. They live on the border with Iran. The remaining 30% are the Uzbeks and the Tajiks. They live in the north, and they are called the Northern Alliance people. The Americans, because they mistrust the southern Afghanistanis, which are 60%, they have joined the Northern Alliance. So today, if Afghanistan has 35 or so ministers, only 6 are from the majority of 60%. So the 6 include Mr. Karzai, who is a Pashtun, who is from the south. The remaining 29 or 28 ministers are from the north. The head of the army, the head of the intelligence, the defense minister, the vice president, all of them come from the north. It is the army, 80% of the army which is being trained is from the north. Now this is where the problem is today. The people in the south, who are the majority, they are being disregarded. And they are the ones who are now going to stand up. And they are the ones who are going to cause a lot of problem. Because the Americans have sided with the ones in the north, which is the minority. The Americans, as I said about 30 minutes ago, that the only right that they did in Iraq was they restored the power with the majority. Saddam Hussein was a Sunni, and he was 30% of the population of Iraq. But he, for 28 years, ruled Iraq with a stick. So when the Americans went in, the only good thing that the Americans did was they restored the power back to the majority, power back to the Shiites. The Shiites are now running the government. And that is how it should be, because they are the majority. But unfortunately, this is what the Americans have not done in Afghanistan. And that is where the problem of the future lies. This is the problem that we'll see that Afghanistan, as soon as the Americans go, there'll be a very big, I think, the greatest civil war in Afghanistan. Because these people in the south have been left out. The people in the north have been armed and trained by the Americans. And as soon as the Americans leave, there'll be a big civil war. The Haqqani network, maybe at this time, Mrs. Clinton is talking about this in Pakistan. It's just such a great coincidence that today is the day when Gaddafi was killed, and a lot of people remember this day. And today was also the day when your college asked me to come and speak to you on the subject. And today is also the day when Hillary Clinton, along with some of the top guys in the US administration, has gone to Pakistan. And she's going to talk about the Haqqani network. Now, Haqqani network is a network of Pashtuns. Haqqani is the father, Haqqani, the big guy, the older guy. This group was formed here in the White House by Mr. Reagan to fight the Soviets. That's the strange part here. Isn't it strange that the Americans, Saddam Hussein was almost a great friend of Donald Rumsfeld. Donald Rumsfeld, twice, there are pictures of him on a boat on the Euphrates River, having a party and seeing a ballet dancer perform with Saddam Hussein. So Saddam Hussein was with the Americans, and then he lost favor and he had to be killed. Of course, there was a trial, and he was killed. Talk about Hosni Mubarak, the greatest supporter of the Americans in that area, suddenly lost favor and removed, and now there is so much chaos and turmoil in Egypt, nobody really knows what's going to happen in Egypt. I personally think the situation is worse than when Hosni Mubarak was in power. They don't know what to do. Starting tomorrow, you don't know what you want to do with Libya. So it's very ironical that Americans want to play the policeman of the world, and they are the sole superpower, and they need to play the policeman. But then, are you ready to pay the price? The price is your faulting economy, and the price is the number of people you lose. Sometimes nations say that doesn't matter, we lose people, but we will be the policeman of the world. Well, if you're ready to say that, then of course you are the only policeman today. But I don't think that's what the people of the United States want. I speak to a lot of people. I have many, many, many friends in the US. They all talk of the troops to come back home. They must come back home. We went after Osama bin Laden. Osama bin Laden had hit them, and we killed him. We've taken our revenge. Now we have no business. They want them to come back. So do you want to be the policeman? And for that you'll have to pay a price. The price in your people, in your army, and the price in your money. And I don't think that looks so good at the moment. Anyway, Haqqani is a group which is now fighting the Americans. They were with the Americans. And let me say one thing, that Pakistan and the US see absolutely, they're on the same line, on the same page, on 9 issues out of 10. But there is an issue. That if you think that Pakistan will listen and eliminate the Haqqani group, I think that's not true. That's not going to happen. To Pakistan, Haqqani group is someone that they want to rely on once there is chaos and madness in Afghanistan. And it's very difficult for Pakistan to fight or to eliminate the Haqqani group. The priority, every nation has its own priorities. You have your priority, we have ours. In 9 cases out of 10, our and your priorities, they are on the same page. But unfortunately, in some issues, one of them is Haqqani, and I can't think of another one where they conflict. So Haqqani group is they have about, their estimates, the older Haqqani who was in the White House during Mr. Reagan's days is old. He's about 65, 66. But his 2 sons are doing the fighting. It is said that they are the only organized body. There are reports, there are about 20,000 of them. They're very fierce fighters, and they are fighting. So that's about the Haqqani group. You could ask questions. The last issue I want to talk about is Admiral Mullen. A very good officer, great service to the US, no doubt about it. A great friend of Pakistan, somebody who understood Pakistan very well. Unfortunately, on the eve of his retirement, he had to issue a statement. Now that is something which has been very surprising. He knew all along the Haqqanis were fighting in Afghanistan. He never mentioned them. If I could meet him sometime and ask him, why did you have to, on the day of your retirement, have to say that what he said, that Haqqani group is supported by the Pakistanis. He knew all along that they were supported by the Pakistanis. There are reasons now. People are saying that he's looking for a job, he's retired, and all the other people at that time got jobs. General Petraeus is now the head of CIA, so he's got a job, very nice job. Admiral Mullen doesn't have a job. So maybe he was made to say this, but I would still say that he was a very seasoned and an able military man who understood the situation more than many, many Americans did. Why he said this at the end, that's like a mystery. I'm all right. This is just a map of Afghanistan, and as you can see, the dark portions are the area where the Taliban or the Pashtuns are. This is all astride the border. And if you see the red line, that's the Durand line. Both sides of the border are these people. I've spoken about them a lot. This is the elder Haqqani, the founder of the Haqqani Network Group. And in the White House with Mr. Reagan. This is just from the press, old press. This is Newsweek cover 2 or 3 weeks ago, and there is Admiral Mullen standing on a wedding cake, and the gentleman who's fallen down is the army chief of Pakistan Army. But actually the reality is, this is how I see it. The army chief is standing, Mullen is gone. If you turn this picture around, I'm not a great one with computers and all, but I just turned this picture around and this is what I found in the picture. The army chief is still there, and Mr. Mullen is gone. I don't know why he said what he did. But these are some of the resulting realities, and I have spoken about them as I've gone along. I will just talk about, just a word about suicide bombers. 15, 20 years ago, when the first suicide bombers appeared in Palestine or in Israel, I used to wonder, I used to think that how can a man blow himself up? How can you kill yourself? But this used to be once in 6 months or once in a year, and we used to forget this. Then it became, when the Americans went to Iraq, we had suicide bombers, and we used to have, on an average, of a suicide bombing once a week. Sometimes more, but on an average once a week. And I used to say, my goodness, so many suicide bombers. And in Pakistan now, we've had 3 suicide bombings in a day. We have had more suicide bombings than the whole world put together. We have really, really suffered on account of the suicide bombings. Jihad, Osama bin Laden put this thought in the mind of people all over the world. And Osama bin Laden faded away, sitting somewhere, hiding somewhere. But he put this mind, and that jihad is the way out. And so you see these little splinter groups, totally local, but inspired by the thought of Osama bin Laden. Religious orthodoxy. Osama bin Laden, a Muslim, his stated aim was to kill Christians or Americans, but he killed more Muslims than he killed more Americans. Look at the guy who 3 months ago killed those people in Oslo. He hated Muslims. He said Muslims should be eliminated. And what did he do? In one day, he killed 73 Christians. 73 Christians in one day. So these guys are very crazy. They end up killing the wrong people all the time. I'm not saying that the right people should be killed, but I'm just saying that they're killing the wrong people. Okay. So these are some of the myths, and they're very explanatory. A force can never win a situation. And freedom fighters, when you call them terrorists, I think they're wrong, you're wrong. And solutions can be imposed. You can't impose a solution. This is one for the Americans. If you think the governments can, corporations are very powerful, very powerful. And if they were the privately, if I met some people, I would tell you that there are some corporations in the US who fund campaigns of presidents, and they get presidents elected here in the US, and then they reap the reward. So you cannot control these corporations. They have become huge. They have to sell their wares, they have to do R&D. Media can be muzzled? No. Technology can replace human intelligence? Once again, no. And my favorite one is that history and geography are irrelevant if you have superior force. They're not irrelevant. This is some sayings of Mr. Obama. And to my surprise, I don't find him very popular with a lot of Americans when I've spoken to. But I think he's a thinking man. He's got a mind. Maybe he's not at the right. I think he's too. All right, I will not say anything here. This is an American audience, and but he has a mind. Unfortunately, a lot of his predecessors did not. I can say that, and. And he says these things, he makes a point, he explains the point, and there is merit in what he says. Unfortunately, when you see these people campaigning from the Republican Party, I saw a debate last night. My goodness, they're like pygmies in front of him. He will just chew them up, each one of them. I mean, if that's the kind of leadership that the Republicans, I mean, it's your own country. But if that's the leadership, if you want to put up or throw up against Obama, I think he'll just chew them, because I mean he is brilliant. I mean, one president I saw in a debate before was Clinton, who was also brilliant. But then, of course, but this one is. I mean, I'm at a loss for words, but I mean, but I think he's. But he says these great things, and he thinks that he knows. He has a mind. I'm sure anybody who becomes the president has a mind. But then it's very important from where he comes, this man. And I'm not against anybody who is suddenly, I find, I was last month here, I was speaking at 4 places, and that was the start of one of the candidates. And now that candidate is doing very well, I was surprised. And so if you can sell a lot of pizzas, I don't think you can become the president of USA. But he's doing wonderful. I mean, he's amazing. So good luck to all of them. I mean, this is their country. But this is what Mr. Obama had to say. And this is a lady I have great regards for. Maybe 10, 15 years, I had great sympathy for her. I used to feel very sorry for her because, because what she had landed up marrying somebody. But I used to be very sorry for her. And I never thought she was so brilliant. But let me tell you that she is truly a brilliant lady. There is no question about it. And she is not what she comes out here to be. When you say she's Mrs. Clinton, she's certainly not Mrs. Clinton. She is Hillary Clinton. She has a mind, and she's very, very astute and very smart. She came to Pakistan about 7 or 8 months ago, and she said, I want to address the people of Pakistan. And she was given a clean slate. They said, all right, these are the TV channels, and she can make a live address. And she addressed people of Pakistan. And she was brilliant. She talked about where the Americans had gone wrong, where the Pakistanis had gone wrong. And she is one person that I thought understood the entire situation. She's gone back again today, and she said something in Afghanistan that we have to push the Pakistanis more. Now, I don't know what is going to happen tomorrow, but she is in Pakistan now. But this is what she had to say in 2 interviews. And it just makes a lot of sense. It just shows somebody who is, I would rate her very high. But the problem is that she's a woman, and the American man already says why we elected somebody we didn't want, or they will never elect a woman as their president. I mean, this is what I feel. I don't know whether they will one day, but she's got a mind, and she speaks that mind. But this is November 10th. This is a year ago. Can you move on? Okay. This is another person who's a smart man, left the government in good times. This is also the indication of a man who's smart. Remember Colin Powell left? Smart man. He left, he said, well, this is not going anywhere that he wanted to. And this man also. Robert Gates. We have moved not half, but we have, as you can, we have an army of about 19, 20 divisions. And so we moved 6 divisions onto the Afghan border. Remember, our army is meant to fight in the East. East is our main adversary, the only adversary is India. This army is meant to fight the Indian army. Now, one-third of this army has now gone to another task, to the secondary task, to the western borders. And that's where the whole thing has gone wrong. That's where Pakistan is being pinched. That gradually we are falling more into the hands of, and let me say, the Indians would want more than the 6 divisions to be put in on the border with Afghanistan. If we have to do an military action against the Haqqani group in North Waziristan, we will need to put 2 more divisions. So gradually we are being inducted into a role which we are not meant to. We were not meant to fight on the Afghan border. These troops are meant to defend our borders in the east against the Indians. So that's where the whole thing is going wrong. This is another smart chap. I don't know how will he perform without his uniform, because in uniform, I think he's a smart man. He's just got a new job, and but I mean, I wish him all the best. But he says that this is the kind of fight we are in for the rest of our lives. Smart man. Now, this just shows as to what Russia is doing in Afghanistan today. I mean, while you think that the Americans are fighting this war and all, the Russians are very much in Afghanistan already. They're doing a great deal. While the Americans are fighting, the Russians are saying that we are rebuilding Afghanistan. China is also in Afghanistan. They have promised up to $4 billion they will spend in Afghanistan. And India, it has no contiguous border with Afghanistan, but India is doing a great deal in Afghanistan. As a result of all this, the Pakistan army is now, it's being turned. We were all meant for the eastern borders. We are now on the western borders. Well, this is, I don't think this is very relevant at this moment, but we can talk about this in the questions and answers. This is from Al-Qaeda. I have a different opinion at this time, and so I'll just run through these. This is just a slide to show, unfortunately, where India and Pakistan is. The one on the top is the Pakistani Prime Minister, and one at the bottom is the Indian Prime Minister. And whenever they get together, this is all what they talk about. The Pakistani Prime Minister talks about Kashmir, and the Indian Prime Minister talks about the Mumbai attack. Unfortunately, they can't outgrow this. That's the unfortunate part. This is the Economist magazine 4 weeks ago, and I think it's a good depiction, but maybe a little exaggerated. But they call the most dangerous border in the world is between India and Pakistan. So that I just thought I'll bring that here and show to you that it is a dangerous border. It can just explode. This is a slide which talks of countries where Afghanistan, the first one is geography. US, geographically, there is nothing that you have to do with US, with Afghanistan, historically, religious, economic, language, culture, politics. But yes, you had a grouse, you were hit on 9/11, and therefore you can say that there is a tick mark here. Russia, nothing common, but they were beaten here and they want to come back. India, nothing common. China, nothing common. Iran, everything common. And Pakistan, everything common. So this is just to show as to who's. This is a convoy of tankers going into Afghanistan, and they've been burnt. And there are a lot of these tankers which are burnt, which are taking fuel for the US troops in Afghanistan. This is just one picture of a happening less than 4 weeks ago. Well, we get on to the, these are all, I've spoken about all of them, and I'm not going to repeat any of these. And finally, I've just brought here, I made a slide here, just to show you that there are little known things about Pakistan, and I thought people should know that. And we are the largest Muslim army of the world. We are the largest Muslim country, almost. We are, Indonesia is said to be, but there are conflicts. We haven't had a census, and we could be the largest. But then Indonesia is also a very large country. But I don't think a lot of people know this. We are the largest contributor of United Nations peacekeeping troops in the world. We have over 100,000 troops on peacekeeping duties. We are the largest contributor. So we are not a terrorist country. So that's just something which I just thought I'll bring it out here. We are the only Muslim nuclear nation. We are the 6th largest population of the world. And we have a large border with Afghanistan. 80% of everything that goes into Afghanistan goes through Pakistan. China is only Western outlet to sea is through Pakistan. You must not forget this. China is very interested in getting an access from north to south through Pakistan. And China wants that outlet because they don't have a sea on their west. Gwadar port, which sits on 70% of the world's largest oil sea routes. This is a new harbor, a new port which has been built by Pakistan. It's a strategic port. It sits over the mouth of the Persian Gulf. And through the Persian Gulf, 70% of the world's oil and gas is shipped through. And the Chinese will give their right arm to be able to play a role here, to control this port. The Americans have been telling the Pakistanis, don't give it to the Chinese. And so there is a big tussle going on at this time. And the Americans know it. If relations between Pakistan and the US unfortunately break down, China will come in a big way. So they want this port. They want to control the flow of oil tankers out of the Persian Gulf. Very strategic port. We are very short of electricity. Big issue here in Pakistan. Some more points. Almost 40% of the Pakistan army is on the Afghan border. We have had the most people killed since 9/11. Most people killed as a result of this war. Most suicide attacks. We've got 16 out of 25 of Al-Qaeda's top leaders. 16 have been caught by the Pakistanis and handed over to the United States. And some of them are in this state where you have this high-value prison, what is it called? These guys, Khalid Sheikh Mohammed and all, they are in. So they've been caught in Pakistan and given to the Americans. So I thought we were doing well with the Americans. Not one Pakistani has ever been a part of Al-Qaeda. Army is, of course, predominant, and we can talk about this in the questions if you want to. Why is the army predominant? We have the largest refugee population in the world today. We also have some interesting, this state also has, I was told that you have some 14 peaks and you'd call them 14ers or whatever, very high peaks. But we have, out of the world's 20 highest peaks, 8 are in Pakistan. So that's a lot of activity people are interested in. We're also, just for interest's sake, America is a great sport-loving nation. We've also the world champions in cricket, hockey, and squash. So that's the good side of Pakistan again. We're also the world's largest producer of rice, of wheat, cotton, milk. A lot of people don't know this, but I just thought I'll add here. So we're doing good things too. I mean, we're fighting a war, we're doing lots of things there, and amongst that, we keep doing these things also. Okay. This is the final statement that I want to make before I sit down and take questions. This is in the form of 6 statements that I make. These are my own statements. These are my observations. I've had people disagree with me, but I can judge, I can make an assessment. And the first one is that Afghanistan, as I said, is heading for its greatest civil war. There will be a big civil war in Afghanistan. This is the first statement I want to make. The second one is India stands to gain a lot if Pakistan is strong and India has a relationship with Pakistan. Everything that India produces has a market in Central Asia. A truck of potatoes, a truck of tomatoes, a truck of onions will take 5 days to go through Pakistan into Kazakhstan. These states, these newfound states, need a lot of these things. And Indians don't need to look anywhere else but trade with Central Asia, and the route goes through Pakistan. It'll bring so much prosperity to India. In the process, Pakistan as well, because these trucks will run through Pakistan. It's a great opportunity for India, but somehow that part is often lost in that old history of enmity with Pakistan. China stands to gain the most if tomorrow Hillary Clinton comes back and reports to Mr. Obama that our talks have broken down and we have to take a harsher action in North Waziristan. And China stands to gain. China will then want to open this route from the north to the south in Pakistan. They already have a route which is called the Karakoram Highway, which links China up to the north of Pakistan. And then if they can build a highway and a train, a communication corridor right up to this port, the Chinese will have a big opening for all their goods, and they will have a lot of importance, military and of course economic. So China stands to gain a lot. So this is the third statement I want to make. And the fourth one is a stable Pakistan is in the interest of the world. It's in the interest of the region and also in the interest of India. I make this fifth statement that the United States cannot do without Pakistan. And I call this like a marriage between the Americans and the Pakistanis. There are ups and downs. There are some very close moments. And then in a long marriage, there are ups and downs. But you can't leave each other. You can't say, all right, bye-bye. You cannot do without the other. And finally, there is no more Al-Qaeda. This is just a false propaganda that Al-Qaeda exists. This is something which the West, and in the West especially the CIA and the other agencies have created this, that there is Al-Qaeda here and Al-Qaeda there and Al-Qaeda there. Al-Qaeda is an extinct organization. There are splinter groups that you need to look for and take care of. Al-Qaeda as an organization ceased to function even well before Osama bin Laden was killed. So with this, I've come to the end of my presentation, and I say that this great game continues. This great game will continue after the Americans leave. The Russians will come back, and then after years, when the Russians go, maybe the Americans will want to come back again. So this game will go on and on and on. And this is a little bit about myself. The views that I've expressed today are purely my own. I'm not sponsored by anybody. I do speak, I have a mind, and I feel very happy at the end of the day that I've been able to tell a lot of people that what is actually happening. Don't trust what you see on the television all the time. Some of the times it's meant for a particular purpose. But I live there. I'm based in Pakistan, and I live there, and I'm a very keen observer of what is happening. With this, I'd like to say thank you very much, and we'll get on to any questions. I'm sure there must be some questions, and thank you very much. Yes, sir. If there are questions, please. Wow. They're just going to get you the mic. I mean, can you get the mic here, please? Thank you. Sorry, there is a lot of noise of this projector here.
Yeah, so in terms of your prediction of a great civil war in Afghanistan, does the continued presence of the United States in the region inhibit the timing, or does it exacerbate the tensions that would lead to civil war?
I personally think that I personally think that if the United States stayed there, it'll be good for the region. But I see that the United States will not be able to stay there because there are pressures from the people of the United States, great pressures, and then the politics of the United States, because it's a winning point for any election campaign in the US to say that we will get all our troops back home. And so therefore, the decision to stay or not to stay, the decision to protect the area will take a backstage. It'll be more on the grounds that the people of the United States want their troops to come back home. And I personally think that that is what is going to happen. And that is where I say that there will be a war between the people of Afghanistan. They have about 30 million people there, which is quite a lot of people. And they're all very fierce. They all have weapons. For hundreds of years, they've done nothing but fight. Fighting to them comes just natural. So they will fight and kill each other, and destabilize the region. And I wish the Americans could stay, but I have a feeling that the Americans will not be able to stay. Although prudence and common sense will say that they stay, but politics will pull them out there, because politics and economics will be such a force that people will say, what are you doing there? The American people don't know all this, and therefore I personally think that that's not going to happen. Yes, sir. Any other question?
Yeah, I have a question. You mentioned that the public interest, there were politics for us to leave. I think it's public interest for us to leave. It costs us over $1 million for each troop that we have in Afghanistan. And you kept talking about the fact that the United States had been hit. We lost 3,000 people. We lose 45,000 people every year because we don't provide health care. With the money that we are spending in Afghanistan, we could provide health care and save 45,000 lives. So, and the American public wants us out of there. It's the corporations that want us to stay.
Well, I entirely agree with you. That's a part of my answer to the last question was that the people of the United States here want their army back. They want the money spent on Afghanistan to be spent on people of the United States. And it makes sense. Why not? I mean, the first priority is your money should be spent on you. Why should this money be spent on somewhere else when you don't really have a reason at this time? You had a reason when you went after Osama bin Laden. But once you've taken care of him, then it doesn't make sense to spend money when your own people need that money. And I agree with you. And that's where the politics comes in. And that's where I think that the Americans will pull out. And that's where I answered the professor that although prudence and common sense dictates that the Americans stay on, but that will not happen. Yes, sir. Can we have the lights on? Because we don't need this. Can we have the lights on, please?
Good evening, General.
Yes, sir.
Rashid, Ali, Malik, trying to let that roll off my tongue. I'd like to know a little more about that $4 billion poppy harvest, where it goes, how it's produced, is it all done lawfully, is there taxed, and some of your other crops I'm also interested in the environment, the geography of your rainfall, your climate, and things of that nature. Thank you.
Afghanistan was always known to grow poppy, always, because Afghanistan is, it's a very harsh climate, and the climate is good to grow poppy. I mean, it's good. And all these people, Afghanistan is broken into 31 or 32 or 33 provinces. And 25 or 26 of these provinces grow poppy. And the Americans, when they went in, they told these poppy growers that you don't grow poppy and we'll give you money. The money that you earn by growing poppy and selling it to the world, we will give you money. Don't grow poppy, because when you grow poppy, you're hurting a lot of the children of the world, I mean, a lot of the people of the world. So the Americans went with this. A lot of the Afghan leaders understood this point, and they agreed that, and they burnt their poppy fields. But this was 8 or 9 years ago. Now that's come back. The only provinces in Afghanistan out of the 33 provinces which have relative peace are the ones which grow poppy, because tacitly the Americans allow these people, and they look the other way. They say, all right, as long as you don't create trouble, as long as you don't hit our troops, you can grow what you want to. We will not. Now what has happened is that this poppy used to be moved, and it used to land up in New York, it used to land up in Dusseldorf, it used to land in Germany. All were moving up out of Afghanistan, then heading west. But the Americans put a lot of pressure, and this movement west has been stopped.
It has not been entirely stopped. But what has happened is that this movement, it has to move out of Afghanistan. It cannot move south. Some of it moves south, but in the south is where all the battle is taking place. So they can't move through all this war. So it moves up north. Once it goes north, it can travel either west or east. In the past years, it was traveling to the west and was landing up maybe here in your state, in all the places. That the Americans have tightened. Now, that poppy is still being grown. Now, where is it going now? It's turning east. It's gone to Russia, is going into China. And now they are being hurt because the poppy is being grown, it's being sold. And it has to find an outlet because it will, if it was being sold, I don't really know how much is it worth, but let's say it was being sold for $100 for this much of poppy, it has now become this much of poppy for $500 here because it's become more expensive. So, but it's still being grown, and it's not at this time a serious issue with the Americans at this time. They have got other serious issues, unfortunately. And poppy growing has come back into Afghanistan. A lot of these big landlords, warlords, grow poppy. That's their number one income. They grow poppy and they ship it out in truckloads. Yes, sir. Yeah.
If the U.S. withdraws from Afghanistan and civil war breaks out there, as you fear might happen, do you foresee Pakistan being able to maintain any stability? And secondly, do you foresee any countries in the region gaining an upper hand because of those civil wars in Afghanistan?
It's a good question. Pakistan cannot control anything in Afghanistan. Afghanistan is now so heavily militarized. It has got so much weapons. It already had weapons. And maybe, I don't know how many of you know that the Afghanis copy every weapon in the world. Every weapon they copy. And they make it beautiful. Any weapon. There are reports that they are now capable of making surface-to-air missiles also. I mean, they have a great arms industry. They make these weapons themselves. Pakistan will not be able to interfere in Afghanistan because Afghanistan is an entity by itself. But what Pakistan will be able to do is to be able to pull back its troops which have got locked into an area where they should not be. They are on the Afghan border. They should be back on the eastern border with India. We are not going to war with India. We cannot. We are the smaller of the two. When you are in the military, you are taught that in our military, we were taught that if Indians have 5 soldiers, you need to have 1 soldier. If the Indians had 5 tanks, you need to have 1 tank. If the Indians had 5 aircraft, you need to have 1 aircraft. That's like the ratio. That's just to protect yourself. This is not the ratio of an army which can invade another army. It cannot, because the numbers are such. So if we have 20 divisions, they have 60 divisions, or maybe 70 divisions. They have great superiority. But within this inferiority that we have, half the army, or not half, maybe 40% of the army, Pakistan army is now doing a job which it should not be doing. That is not their job to fight on the Afghan border. So we really cannot do very much in this war. But what will happen is that Afghanistan will resolve its own internal situation, and eventually the majority will prevail. And why should we object to majority prevailing? The majority has to rule. That's the principle of democracy. The majority must rule. And if the Pashtuns are the majority, they will rule. Unfortunately, the Pashtuns are extremists. But then, why should the Americans care whether they're extremists or as long as they don't bother the rest of the world? With Osama bin Laden gone and a lesson being, sent out to people that if you mess with the Americans, if you mess with us, we will go after you wherever you are. And that you've done that. Now is the time to reflect, to do something to restore the image of the Americans. The Americans, why is it that the Americans don't think that they've spent so much money in Pakistan? But to be honest, an ordinary American on the street of Pakistan is likely to be shot. Why is this happened? There is something wrong somewhere. So I think that is what we need to concentrate on. A lot of the people like myself, we understand the value of friendship with the West, with the US. We understand this. But then I'm not the majority. There are 200 million people in Pakistan who are uneducated. They don't have a lot of the facilities of the rest of the world. And they want what they see on the television. And unfortunately, a lot of people in Pakistan are now seeing television. And they're seeing all these things happen in Libya, and in Syria, and in Egypt. Not that that might happen, but the worst is the extremists. And we are fighting that war. I just want to leave this message here, that we are fighting a very, very grave war. We are already on that tight line. This, God forbid, can go this side or that side. And if we are pushed too much, the extremists will win. And I would ask the United States, and I would ask all the other people who have, who think about, who are thinking people, that do not push Pakistan to cross that limit, because if you did cross that limit, we will unfortunately, we will lose whatever sanity we have in Pakistan. Yes, sir.
Isn't it true that the United States is in Pakistan for one reason, to be close to your nuclear weapons?
You see, the nuclear weapons, there's a little bit of history here. The Pakistanis, remember, and I don't want to say that we are an offensive nation. We are at times, portrayed as an offensive nation. We are not. If you look back, we've always had this thing with India. India and Pakistan were formed when the British left. And the division of the continent, subcontinent, was to be on the basis of religion. The only other country where this has happened is Israel. That country, Israel, has been formed on the basis of religion. India and Pakistan were the other countries which were formed on the basis of religion. It was decided by the British that wherever there are Muslims, it will become a part of Pakistan. That was the underlying basic theory on which the partition was based. Everywhere else this happened, except for Kashmir. And Kashmir is up in the north of both the countries, right on in the north. It sits like a crown on top of India and Pakistan. And Kashmir was 93% Muslims. It had to be a part of Pakistan. That was what the British left. This decision was deferred, and it was said that we will do a referendum, ask the people whether they want to join India or Pakistan, whether they're Muslims. And the United Nations passed a resolution in 1948 that the people of Kashmir will be asked whether they are Muslims or Hindus. And if they were Hindus, more it will go to India. That resolution has never been implemented. That's number one point. As soon as the British left, the Indians moved troops into Kashmir, and the Pakistanis at that time also moved into Kashmir, because this was becoming an area of confrontation. Where these two armies, the Indians moved from the east and the Pakistanis moved from the west and into the north. Wherever these two armies came into contact, that is called the ceasefire line between India and Pakistan. Kashmir today is divided between the two. We've gone to 3 wars. 2 of the wars I have fought with the Indians on Kashmir. We lost a lot of valuable lives. The Indians have used all their might. They have not been able to take any part. We have used all our might. We have not been able to take any part. It's very difficult. The peaks and the mountains are very high. The importance of Kashmir to India is that all the rivers that flow into India, except one, emerge from Kashmir. And the importance to Pakistan is that all the rivers which flow into Pakistan also start from Kashmir. And if Kashmir went to India, we would fear that the Indians would stop the water and Pakistan will have a big drought, turn into a desert. Similarly, the Indians feel that if Pakistan got Kashmir, that they will shut all the rivers and India will become, a desert. So that's the basic premise. Otherwise, Kashmir is a beautiful country. It's very beautiful. It's got mountains and lakes and so on and so forth. So that is the basic thing between India and Pakistan. We've gone to war on this. Now the nuclear thing. India in 1960s decided to go nuclear. And they went about in an announced manner. It's not that the Indians did this secretly. They announced it that we are trying to make an atom bomb and we'll put this technology to peaceful purposes also. India announced it in 1960s. They opened up a nuclear reactor. We did not. We kept quiet. But then 15 years later, we realized that the Indians were making an atom bomb, not an atom reactor, atomic reactor. We needed to have a bomb too. As we started to ask for the technology and so on and so forth, we were all forced not to do this. And therefore, our program had to be a covert program, a secret program, because the government, the world was not allowing Pakistan to make an atom bomb. Pakistan went ahead secretly and made its bomb. India went ahead openly and made its bomb because India had decided to do this first. In the late 80s, India decided, for what reason I don't know, because they said they fell into the category of a bomb in the basement. This is a nation which has a bomb, but which hasn't exploded the bomb. But the world knows that they have a bomb. So something like what Israel is now. Israel has never exploded an atom bomb, but the world knows that Israel has a bomb. So they are in the category of a bomb in the basement. They have a bomb. But when you explode, you go into a new category where you join the category of US and Russia who exploded bombs and so on and so forth. The Indians decided to explode the bomb, and the Indians exploded the bomb. Now, Pakistan was not to be, not to lag behind. And Pakistan said, people in Pakistan took to the streets and they said, you also explode a bomb, because basically a nuclear bomb is a deterrence. It is not meant to be used. I don't think so. That even the thought of using it, I think, is criminal. So this bomb, Pakistan, they had the bomb and they had to explode the bomb. And Pakistan, after a good 5 months of the Indian explosion and great pressure from the public of Pakistan, and the public of Pakistan was saying to the government that you are telling lies, you don't have a bomb. The Indians have a bomb and you don't have a bomb. And then the Pakistanis exploded the bomb. And now, on a lighter side, I don't think there can be a lighter side to nuclear technology and so on, but on a lighter side, I would say that the Time magazine estimates, it says that Pakistan, the Time magazine, and I don't know whether it's true or not, it says Pakistan has from 90 to 110 atom bombs, and India has 70 to 90 atom bombs. So in that little way, it makes us more happy, because, you know, we started afterwards, we are a smaller country, but that's not a great thing to be happy about. But I'm just saying that this is the estimate of the Time magazine. So we have to have an atom bomb. The question that you asked, I don't know whether I've answered this question or not. That's the reason. Unfortunately, sorry sir, I'll just come to you, 1 minute. Unfortunately, we've had the guy who invented or who worked in making the atom bomb for Pakistan is a great national hero. Great national hero. But he was involved reportedly, and there was proof provided to the government of Pakistan that he's been selling the technology to North Korea and to Iran. And therefore, this is a 20-year-old thing. It's not current. 20 years ago this was said. And therefore, the government of Pakistan had to take a decision what to do with this man. He was a national hero. On every second truck which plies private transport, which plies in Pakistan, his picture is on the back of every truck in Pakistan. He's a hero in Pakistan. It's very difficult to deal with a situation like this. People just say this is bloody American propaganda. But the fact is that there was proof provided to the government of Pakistan that this man was involved. And therefore the government of Pakistan dismissed him, and he has nothing to do with the nuclear program. And for the last 10 or maybe 11 years, he's living a life in disgrace. He's not allowed to make public appearances. He's not allowed to go anywhere. He's under watch. He's living, but he's not in the jail because he's such a hero that every truck has his picture behind him. So that's about that man. But that is a thing which happened 20 years ago. And sometimes our critics want to rub us, and they say that Pakistan is involved in the sale of illicit nuclear technology. This is 20 years old. This happened long ago, not anymore. Yes, sir.
Well, I just want to continue on that just a minute. Isn't it true that the United States is has always been trying to control the codes and the access and the location of the bombs for a lot of reasons?
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense that when such a thing is asked, that the United States is interested. I've seen these debates. I keep talking about these debates that you have of presidential candidates. And my favorite question, which is put to these 7 gentlemen and 1 lady, is that you are the President of the United States and you get a call at 3 o'clock in the morning. Mr. President, the extremists have taken over Pakistan and they are about to take over the nuclear assets of Pakistan. What will you do? And I mean, this is a very fearful scenario, and the answers I get from one of the Texan, I don't want to name anybody, I'm still in the United States, but one of the gentlemen he says, "Oh, I'll take them out before the extremists will take them." Well, how can you take them out? I mean, Pakistan is an independent country. It's got a very, very, very professional army. I want to tell you this again and again and again. It's a professional army. These nuclear assets are in control of the army. It will be foolish to assume that anybody would know where these assets are. They would be dispersed. Surely they would be dispersed. These codes are so closely played. Even the Prime Minister of Pakistan was not allowed. He was not given a briefing on the nuclear assets of Pakistan because the Prime Ministers are somehow not trusted enough. And they said, well, you may win an election in Pakistan, but we are not going to share the nuclear technology and the assets of Pakistan with you. So what I'm saying is that they are very well protected. And yes, I'm sure that there is a very deliberate effort by the Americans to know where these assets are, to be able to somehow control them. But I think there will be an equal effort, but a stronger effort by the military. The military is the custodian of these weapons in Pakistan. And they have a special force created to protect them, to deploy them. And I think it is very difficult for the United States to be able to take them out, if they wish to take them out. I think it's very difficult. That's all that I can say about the nuclear weapons. Yes, sir.
There's
Yes.
time for one more question.
Yes, sir. Yeah, you've been, yes.
In your viewpoint, what do you think Iraq is doing about its nuclear capabilities?
Who's doing?
Iraq.
Yeah, I forgot to say something about Iran. I want to just leave this thought with you that Iran is a very difficult country. Iran is not Iraq. And let me talk about the differences between the two. I mean, they look very similar. I, R, A is common, but then there is N and there is Q. Iran is a very proud nation. I'm sorry I can't say that about the Iraqis. Iran is a much bigger nation. Iran is almost 70 to 75 million people. Iraq was only 25 million people. Iraq was a country where, if any one of you was a military man, anybody who has spent any time in the military? Anybody? No. Okay, I'm the only one here. Okay. Okay. I just want to give you an example. If you, and you'll have to tell me, ma'am, where, because it's interesting to know that there is a lady here who's been in the military. Iraq is a country where if you had a tank, a military tank, and if you were in the south of Iraq, and if you had a driver, two drivers who could drive the tank, and you had enough fuel and enough things to eat, you could drive from the south of Iraq to the north of Iraq, right up to the border of Turkey, in one day. In one day. That's the size and the going for military operations in Iraq. Ideal country, small in size, tankable, tanks, when I say tankable, you can go anywhere. And then the number of people in Iraq, not so much homogeneous. There are many, tribes. There are distant forces. There are Shiites, Sunnis. There are people in the north who want to break away. So that's Iraq. Iran, if you took this tank and you started in the south, first of all, it will take you 3 days if you could go over Iran. But the first 10% of Iran would be tankable. The rest is all mountains. it's another Afghanistan. Much worse. Iran is a very difficult country. These people lose, they just forget. They think if we can do this in Iraq, we can do it in Afghanistan, we'll do it in Iran. Iran, unfortunately, proud people. Now your question about the nuclear. I think that they will make the nuclear bomb if they've not already made a bomb. The biggest threat as a result of this nuclear bomb is obviously to Israel. And they're also the biggest, my biggest fear, which will trigger a catastrophic war, is when Israel decides to attack Iran. Israel will attack Iran because the Americans are not willing to do what Israel wants the Americans to do. The Israelis want the Americans to take out the nuclear capability of Iran, which is not so easy. They've also spread their production facilities into at least 6 different sites. And they're different, and they're well in the mountains. And it is very difficult to hit these sites. And Israel would want, before the Iranians could build a bomb, they would want this to be taken out. And they would want this to be taken out by the Americans or by the NATO. And if that doesn't happen, and I fear this very much, that Israel may want to do this themselves, and that will be a very dangerous thing to happen, because already the region is on a tinderbox. And remember, Iran, the largest border, 2,200 kilometers we share with Afghanistan, and 1,500 kilometers we share with Iran. So look at the plight of Pakistan. 1,500 with Iran and 3,300 with India. So I mean, you should realize where Pakistan is. We are in a very tricky part of the world, and we have to stand up for ourselves. And sometimes when we do the standing up, is not in line with what the Americans want, and that's where the problem arises. I ask you that please understand that we have a great relationship, but sometimes we don't see what the other person sees. We have our fears, and the Americans have their fears. And but the Americans are sitting so far away, thousands of miles away. Our fears, I think, should take a priority, because we have to live there. And the Americans, they've done what they had to do. They've taken their revenge, and therefore they should not push Pakistan as much as they want to push Pakistan at this time. So that's my answer to your question, sir.